I'm gonna let you in on a side of American naval power most people never even think about. Everybody loves the sexy stuff, the screaming catapult launches, the F/A-18S ripping into the dark before sunrise, the radar screens glowing like something out of a Pentagon thriller. But me, I want to take you below the flight deck, deep into the steel belly of the USS Harry S. Truman, where another kind of war starts long before the first jet ever touches the catapult. It's somewhere around 0330. The Pacific outside is black as spilled oil, the kind of darkness where the ocean and the sky look like they signed a ceasefire. Above deck, the first yellow shirts are already moving under red deck lights. But down here, 114 Navy culinary specialists are stepping into heat that feels closer to an engine room than a kitchen. I'm talking industrial ovens roaring, kettles the size of hot tubs, steel counters slick with condensation, and a pace that would break most civilian restaurant crews before sunrise. Their mission: feed more than 5,500 sailors, 3 full meals plus mid-rats for the night crew. That's over 17,000 plates every single day. Every single day. To put that into American terms, this galley pushes more volume than some of the busiest fast food chains in the country, except this isn't burgers under a heat lamp. This is fresh eggs, bacon, biscuits, carved meats, salads, soups, fresh baked bread, cookies rolling out in waves, and coffee by the ocean-sized gallon. While pilots are checking target packages and carrier strike group commanders are watching regional tension maps from places like Hormuz and the South China Sea, these sailors are already fighting their own operational battle below deck. And let me tell you something, as a guy who's spent years around military aviation culture, a hungry pilot is just a paperwork accident waiting to happen. That's what civilians miss. On a carrier, food is not just food. Chow is morale, rhythm, discipline, and readiness all stacked on one tray. One delayed breakfast during flight surge ops. One contaminated batch of chicken. One breakdown in timing. And suddenly your sortie cycle starts dragging. Maintenance crews get irritable. Watch standers lose edge. Pilots coming off night recovery get sloppy. In military terms, the galley is not support. It's a force preservation system. Every meal is calculated with almost absurd precision. The Navy has calorie targets, sodium limits, macro balance, allergy controls, religious accommodations, and enough nutritional oversight to make most fitness influencers cry into their protein shakes. These cooks aren't just throwing mashed potatoes at trays. They are managing precision nutrition for a floating city moving through strategic waters. Now imagine doing that in a kitchen where you can barely pivot without bumping another sailor shoulder to shoulder. That's the battlefield down here. 5 galleys spread through a Nimitz-class carrier, every inch optimized like a fighter cockpit. No wasted movement, no wasted storage, no wasted heat. Massive convection ovens can push out hundreds of pounds of meat in a single cycle. Dough mixers chew through 60-pound loads like they're nothing. Giant kettles simmer enough stew to feed a small American town during a snowstorm. And the fryers. Those monsters can drop enough chicken in one batch to make a Southern County Fair jealous. Then there's the bakery. Now this is where it gets personal. You haven't really understood carrier life until you imagine being weeks from land, somewhere deep in the Pacific. No coastline, no family, no silence. And suddenly, the smell of fresh cookies cuts through recycled steel air. That smell matters. Fresh chocolate chip cookies coming out in the middle of a 16-hour ops day hit harder than most speeches from admirals. It's a psychological reset button, a reminder that home still exists somewhere beyond the radar horizon. But that little morale miracle comes at a price. Bakery temps can hit 110, 115, sometimes 120 degrees. It's basically an oven inside an oven. Sailors work drenched in sweat, faces red, uniforms sticking to them, hands moving non-stop through dough prep, trays, rotations, and cleanup. Meanwhile, jets are thundering overhead, and the whole ship vibrates like the steel itself is breathing. And still, they keep moving. Because every tray of cookies, every stack of pancakes, every vat of eggs, every fresh loaf of bread sends a message to the crew. Somebody's still taking care of you. That's why I've always said carrier warfare is won as much by systems as by missiles. The catapult officer and the galley watch are playing on the same team, just in different compartments. Now here's the part that really blows people's minds. A lot of these culinary specialists showed up to the Navy having never worked a professional kitchen line in their lives. Some came in with restaurant backgrounds, sure, but plenty of them had never done more than boil water, fry an egg, or maybe burn instant ramen in a college dorm microwave. Then suddenly they're standing inside one of the most punishing food operations in America, feeding 5,500 sailors while the ship rolls through open ocean in combat aircraft cycle overhead. So the real question isn't whether this is the hardest kitchen in America. It's how these sailors are transformed fast enough to survive it. Before we move into that training pipeline, I want to know something from you. What state are you watching from right now? Texas, Florida, California, maybe somewhere outside the US? And be honest, before this moment, did you ever think the men and women serving breakfast below deck had this much impact on American combat readiness? Drop your state and your answer in the comments, because where we're going next, the pressure gets even worse. So, how does somebody go from barely knowing how to boil water to running one of the most unforgiving kitchens on Earth? This is where the Navy's machine really starts to impress me. Before these sailors ever set foot on a Nimitz-class carrier, they go through Culinary Specialist A School down at Fort Lee, Virginia. Sounds harmless, right? Like some peaceful culinary academy with neat aprons and smiling instructors. Not even close. This place is built to rewire how you think about food. Not cooking for a family, not cooking for a restaurant, cooking for a war machine. The first thing they learn is scale. A civilian chef thinks in portions. A Navy culinary specialist thinks in waves. Breakfast isn't make eggs. It's feed the first 1,800 sailors before the first launch cycle, keep the next 2,000 moving before maintenance turnover, and have the night watch crew covered before they hit the next radar shift. Everything is synchronized with ship tempo. That's the part I love, because it mirrors aviation ops almost perfectly. On the flight deck, launch windows are timed down to seconds. In the galley, meal waves are timed to manpower surges, watch reliefs, and recovery cycles. A pilot climbing down from an F/A-18 after a midnight tanker escort over the Gulf doesn't care how tired the cooks are. He needs hot chow now, because in 6 hours he may be back in the cockpit over Hormuz escorting another package through contested airspace. That means the galley's clock never belongs to itself. It belongs to the mission. And the first deployment shock? Oh, it's brutal. I've heard sailors describe their first week on a carrier galley like stepping into controlled chaos. Imagine it. Oh, 3:30 hits. You're already sweating before the grills are fully hot. The deck above starts shaking from early launches. Senior specialists are barking timing calls, coffee lines are stacking, and you realize this isn't a kitchen. It's an operations center with spatulas. Breakfast crew starts before most of the ship even opens its eyes. Then the lunch prep overlaps around 0900. Dinner starts building before lunch even clears. And somewhere in the background, Mid-Rats is already thinking 3 moves ahead for the sailors working night radar, engine room watch, and flight deck recovery. It's one long relay race with no finish line. Now let's talk about one of the smartest morale weapons the Navy ever deployed, menu variety. Because yes, on paper this is a logistics story, but in reality it's psychology. The menu rotates every 14 to 21 days, which means sailors aren't stuck reliving the same meal loop over and over. Taco Tuesday hits like a holiday. Mongolian grill lines wrap through passageways. Thanksgiving means turkey, stuffing, and the kind of prime rib that makes even the crustiest chief petty officer crack a smile. And when the carrier is operating near Europe, the Mediterranean, or the Middle East, things get even more interesting. Sometimes regional ingredients make their way aboard through the supply chain. Greek feta, Italian pasta, Middle Eastern spice blends. Suddenly a sailor who hasn't seen land in 6 weeks gets a meal that hints at the very waters they're sailing through. It's subtle, but it keeps the mind engaged. It breaks monotony, and monotony is one of the silent killers of morale on long deployments. So, if you were the commander of this ship, what meal would you prioritize to keep morale high during a 9-month deployment? Steak night, Taco Tuesday, fresh cookies at 0200 before flight ops? I'm genuinely curious what you'd choose, because morale doctrine matters more than people think. Now here's where the whole operation turns from impressive to downright cinematic. Resupply. An aircraft carrier can't just pull into a Walmart parking lot when it runs out of lettuce. Every 7 to 10 days, a supply ship pulls alongside while both ships are moving through open ocean. Steel giants side by side, cutting through the sea in formation. Cables shoot across. Cargo lines tighten. Pallets begin flying over the water. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of food move this way. Fresh produce, frozen meats, dry goods, milk, coffee, cereals. Enough inventory to keep 5,500 sailors operational until the next replenishment window. And remember, all this is happening while the carrier remains mission capable. Jets can still be launching, radar can still be tracking, escorts are still screening the perimeter. Somewhere in CIC, someone is probably watching a Chinese surface contact or an Iranian patrol boat track, while below deck, somebody's counting milk crates and frozen chicken pallets. That's American sea power in one image right there. Missiles above, groceries below, both equally mission critical. The storage decks look like a floating industrial warehouse. Pallets stacked to the ceiling, refrigerated compartments humming, everything tagged, rotated, inventoried. Fresh produce gets burned first. Later in the cycle, the menu shifts toward frozen and preserved ingredients. The real artistry is making that transition invisible to the crew. That takes creativity. A great culinary specialist can make canned vegetables taste like somebody's mom still cares. Then comes the moment that separates military cooks from civilian chefs. General quarters. The alarm cuts through the ship. Every compartment hears it. Every sailor moves. And yes, that includes the galley crew. 1 second they're pouring soup or rotating chicken trays. Next second they're dropping everything and sprinting to battle stations, damage control lockers, fire response teams, flooding containment, emergency repair parties. These sailors are cooks, but they are also warfighters. That's the piece civilians almost never understand. The person who just handed a pilot his midnight meal might be the same sailor fighting a compartment fire 10 minutes later. Then the drill ends. They go right back to the ovens, right back to the coffee, right back to feeding the crew like nothing happened. And now I want your tactical take. Do you think this hidden logistics backbone, the resupply ships, storage crews, and galley specialists, is actually one of the biggest reasons the U.S. Navy can dominate places like the Pacific and Hormuz for months at a time? Because in the next part, I'm taking this beyond food and into what really wins wars: morale, psychology, and the invisible systems that keep American power projection alive. Now we get to the part that separates military spectacle from military reality. People love the glamour shots. The F/A-18 launching into a blood-red sunrise, the destroyer screen cutting through the Strait of Hormuz, the missile crews, the radar scopes, the war room maps, the admirals with their calm voices and impossible coffee habits. That's the visible side of power. But the real story, the one I've spent years appreciating more and more, is what happens before any of that. Because no pilot launches sharp on an empty stomach. No maintainer pulls a 14-hour turnaround on jet engines fueled by vending machine crackers. No watch team tracks a fast-moving surface contact at 0300 with low morale and bad nutrition. This is where the galley stops being a kitchen and becomes a force multiplier. Every hot tray that comes off that line below deck has strategic consequences. I'm not exaggerating that for drama. Think about it. A carrier strike group exists to project sustained American power anywhere on Earth. Sustainment is the key word. Anybody can flex for one day. The United States Navy dominates because it can keep flexing for months. That only works because the human machine keeps running. And the human machine runs on food, routine, and morale. I always picture the moment after a hard sortie. A Super Hornet traps on deck after hours over contested water. The pilot climbs out stiff, salty, still mentally replaying radar returns and fuel calculations. He strips off the helmet, heads down the ladder wells, and the first real sign that he's safe is the smell of hot chow and coffee waiting below deck. That meal does something no speech can. It resets the nervous system. It marks the mission as survived. It prepares the body for the next one. That's not comfort, that's combat recovery. Same thing for the grease-stained maintainers coming off the flight line after a brutal turnaround cycle. Same thing for the radar watchstanders, the reactor crew, the damage control teams, the ordnance handlers, the young sailor on their first deployment who hasn't seen sunlight in days and is quietly fighting homesickness in a steel corridor halfway across the world. A hot meal tells them the system still works. And when sailors trust the system, they perform better. That's why the Navy has spent years upgrading food quality, menu rotations, bakery operations, even special occasion meals. A birthday cake in the middle of the Pacific may sound small to civilians, but to a 21-year-old sailor 6 months from home, it can be the emotional anchor that keeps the deployment mentally manageable. Fresh bacon before dawn, cookies after evening watch, coffee before the 0200 launch window. These things are tiny on paper and massive in reality. So let me ask you this. Which military branch do you think has the toughest culinary mission? Navy carriers, Air Force forward air bases, or Marines operating in expeditionary zones? Drop your answer below, because I think this debate gets way more interesting than people expect. Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture. When people talk about American military dominance in the Pacific against China, or in the Gulf opposite Iran, they usually focus on tonnage, missile range, stealth platforms, and carrier air wings. All of that matters, but none of it survives contact with poor sustainment. A badly fed crew gets slower, a demoralized crew gets careless, a sleep-deprived crew without proper nutrition makes mistakes, and on a carrier, mistakes cascade fast. That's why these 114 culinary specialists below deck are strategically more important than most civilians ever realize. They are preserving combat effectiveness one tray at a time. They prevent morale collapse in enclosed steel spaces. They reduce fatigue effects. They maintain rhythm across 24/7 operations. In pure military language, they preserve operational tempo. That's why I call them hidden weapons of naval power. No glamour, no headlines, no medals on cable news. But when a pilot launches to defend American interests in the Pacific, somewhere behind that mission is a culinary specialist who got up before dawn in 120-degree heat and made sure that pilot, that maintainer, and that whole flight cycle had the fuel to function. Support wins wars. That truth has followed every serious military in history, and on an aircraft carrier, it's written in steam, steel trays, industrial ovens, and 20,000 cups of coffee a day. So next time you see a carrier strike group on the news, catapults firing into the sunrise and jets disappearing into the horizon, remember what's happening 5 decks below. A bakery running at furnace temperatures, a sailor rotating trays of cookies, coffee pouring non-stop, breakfast lines already forming, another 5,500 men and women being kept ready for whatever the Pacific, Hormuz, China, Russia, or Iran throws at them next. And maybe the most powerful part of all this is that they do it without glory. Just discipline, heat, timing, and mission focus. That's the real DNA of American sea power. Before we close this one out, I want your prediction. If the Pacific Theater ever turns truly hot, do logistics crews like this become just as decisive as the pilots and missile teams? And one more for the comments. What military job do civilians underestimate the most? Because after this story, I'm willing to bet carrier culinary specialists just jumped way up your list. I'm Mr. PiP, and I'll tell you this much. The next war won't just be won by the people pulling triggers. It'll be won by the people making sure the trigger pullers are still standing.